A subdued session sees Nifty end at a 5-month low. The sensex falls 423 points, while the mid-cap index slips 163 points. Market breadth remains in favor of declines.
Adani Group managers and associates, including Gautam Adani, have been charged by the New York District Court and the Securities and the Exchange Commission of bribery. The news spooks the Adani Group stocks and leads Adani Green to scrap its bond offering.
Indian Hotels hits a fresh high as brokerages raise target after the management unveiled 2030 targets for the company. It plans to increase hotel footprint to 700 and double the revenue to 1,500 crore rupees. UPL strikes a deal with global investor Alpha Wave Global to invest $350 million in its seeds platform Advanta at a post-money valuation of $2.85 billion.
Hello and welcome to a fresh new edition of Markets Forward, your go-to show where we tell you all that transpired today's trading action and also gear you up for tomorrow's session. I'm Naishal, with me as always, Surbhi. Hey Surbhi.
Well, woke up to quite a bit of news, right? It seemed all okay by the time we went to sleep, but in the morning there was this Adani saga to look at once again. And I guess, Nigel, given the fact that global cues were a little troubled, and then we had this big news flow to go over, at least the levels were protected today.
Well, that's what I think the Adani Group news, that's what spooked the street today. But otherwise, it wasn't a very, very bad trading session, I'll say that. Because, the mid-cap index, well, it relatively outperformed in today's trading session. When you had the kind of selling that we saw in the Adani Group, well, the rest of the market was pretty much okay. And the first signs are when the mid-cap index starts outperforming what the headline index is doing. And today, that's precisely what we saw. We're due for a bounce, but I think the next big trigger comes in post the state election official result that comes over the weekend. So we have to get through tomorrow, and the street will be hoping that the current ruling BJP comes back into power in the state elections, which will help the bulls' cause. But Surbhi, given the Adani saga that played out, I don't think it was such a bad outcome.
No, actually not, because the big worry was whether we will even break through the Monday low, which has been the lowest point of this current downtrend so far. But that, thankfully did not happen. The Nifty has managed to close just around that same mark of 23,350, though in the morning we were trading below 23,200 as well. But there was some recovery. And a large part of that recovery came in from the fact that banks decided to cut their losses. Many of them, like State Bank of India, still went home with a bit of negativity. But it wasn't that bad, because from the lowest level, the Bank Nifty recovered a good 650 points. That's something you can't ignore. And then, obviously, you had some buying support come in from the IT names. A lot of the large-cap IT stocks were up and about. The rupee was a big headline today because the rupee continued to make fresh lows against the US dollar. Speaking of the dollar's rally continues to march forward, and that's what I was alluding to earlier. Global cues overall have not been very, very supportive. While we were trading, most of the Asian markets were down, European markets were weaker. And then there's some anticipation about how Wall Street will react to the Nvidia numbers as well, which are in line, but when the growth has really slowed down over there. So in light of all of that, we had a down session and managed to protect some of the critical levels. Well, there's plenty to go over and plenty to talk about over the next 20-odd minutes. We, of course, are going to talk to you about all the top voices, all the key events that took place today. Our movers and shakers coming up with Vinny in just a bit. The Adani Group, obviously, was the key group in focus. We'll talk about that. And then there are these stocks, PNB, ITC and NLC India. Big move on that one on a down day. Why? We'll get to it in just a bit. And then, of course, the key events to track tomorrow. But let's go over to Vinny first to kick off the stock-specific action.
Yes, so we are looking at some of these important stocks, and we have to start with the Adani Group names because they were under pressure today. So looking at the Adani names, Adani Enterprises, Green, Adani Ports, Adani Energy Solutions, Total Gas, all of them have been under pressure, down almost somewhere between the range of 11% to 20%. We also had PSU banks that were not doing well. PSU banks were also under pressure. So when you look at it, something like a PNB, Bob, we have Canara Bank, SBI, Bank of India, all these also saw some bit of pressure today. Moving on, some of the volume buzzers that we should be watching out for. ITC, sharp volumes that we saw in this one. ITC was down 2%, but good volumes was quite high in this. Where SBI, Power Grid, Coal India, as well as NTPC in terms of volume buzzers. While stock-specific and brokerage news flows that came in for these stocks, that was NLC India. We had UPL, Dr. Reddy's, as well as Godavari Power and Indian Hotels. All these were in focus on the back of either news flows or brokerage radar.
Okay, all right, Vinny. Thank you very much for that. So let's quickly move on and get to our guests of the day. We have Ambrish Baliga with us to talk about fundamentals, and Shilpa Rao joins in on the technicals. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being with us. Shilpa, let me open up with you because I think a lot of us were watching for levels. Now this 200 DMA on the Nifty has gone, but at least there was some recovery from the lowest point, the opening gap today. What did you make of today's trade, and what are the next critical levels to keep in mind?
Surbi, if you look at the levels, yes, 23,400, it was breached, the 200 DMA. But, we saw some respite at that, downward spike today, that, the hit that we took today. So if this levels, today's low is held and we continue to sustain above this, then probably, a couple of sessions from here, we could see some short covering rally again towards 24,000. I don't say that there's a trend reversal, but yes, some short-term rally can always happen. But if we breach below 23,200, then definitely we are in deep trouble, where levels of 22,500 to 21,800 can come as well. So wait and watch scenario for a couple of sessions to see where we are headed.
Got it. Okay, all right. Well, let's hop across to Amrish. Amrish, today there were a couple of stocks that did well. I think the top gain on the Nifty was Power Grid. Any view on that name?
No, Power Grid, in fact, I don't track very closely. It's a bit difficult to rate off on that.
A couple of large tech names did well as well. Any view on them? Or otherwise, you could talk to us about Trent, which from the recent lows has bounced quite well.
No, that's true. But then I still see the pressure as far as margins are concerned for Trent. And I think about 2 weeks back, we had discussed about this stock. And I told you that possibly we could see levels of 5,500. I would possibly look at revising my view. Closer to those levels. I'm not saying exactly 5,500 levels, but somewhere close to those levels, possibly I'll change my view. But as of now, I would be negative on Trent.
Okay, all right. Got that. Amrish, we want to come back and ask you about the Adani Group stocks. They were all deep in the red after US court and the Securities Exchange Commission charge Gautam Adani and other executives of bribery and fraud. Hormuz has been on top of the story. He's joining in to fill us in with the details of the order and the company's response. Hormuz?
Nearly 2.5 lakh crore worth of market cap gone for all the Adani Group companies. All of them ending anywhere between 10% to 23% lower for Adani Enterprises. There was a brief recovery towards the close, but then again, the stock started to fall after every recovery was sold into. Now, these developments came after the US District Court and the SEC indicted Gautam Adani and other executives of the group over bribery charges pertaining to some solar energy contracts. And the SEC orders also highlighted a $750 million bond sale that Adani Green had done in September of 2021, some of which was raised through investors in the US as well. And in the light of these developments, Adani Green today called off the proposed dollar bond sale that it was about to undertake. And GQG, one of the earlier investors in the Adani Group stocks at the height of the Hindenburg scandal in 2023, they also put out a statement saying that they are also evaluating portfolio action and monitoring the recent developments. Now, GQG's own shares listed in Australia were down almost 20% in today's trading session. Now, what does the US District Court order? Some more granular details there. They're mentioning that these LOAs were issued to both Azure and Adani Group companies to for manufacturing-linked solar tenders offered by the Solar Energy Corporation of India. Now, the US-linked company was supposed to provide 4 gigawatts of solar power to the SECI. The Adani Group was supposed to provide 8 gigawatts, and the SECI was supposed to find out state electricity companies who were looking to buy the 12 gigawatts of power which these two companies were set to supply. Now, at the time of the award, the size and the scope of the project was among the largest among the global solar energy projects. Now, in light of this, Adani Green had also issued a press release. So had the US entity. The Ranjit Gupta, one of the individuals named in the order, also said that this will, over the next 20 years, result in a profit after tax of $2 billion for the US listed, for the US entity. Now, earlier this afternoon, Adani Group came out with a statement calling all the allegations baseless. They said they will look for all possible legal recourse available, and the fact that they are compliant with all the laws of the land. So this is what the Adani Group said in official capacity, but the stocks ending firmly in the red today.
Got it. All right. Thanks a lot for that, Hormuz. Amrish, coming across to you, what do you think of all the group companies and anything you like?
See, I mean, this is not the first time we have been hearing these sort of allegations, and we have seen major cracks as far as Adani Group is concerned in the past. Now the question is as to when the settlement would happen, because clearly the settlement is going to happen going ahead. It's the question of what is the cost involved. So people are, in fact, are hopeful. I mean, I spoke to a few people in the market. I mean, people are hopeful that it may not be that bad under the Trump regime post January 2025. So we could actually see further cuts, no doubt, in the group stocks because this news just came today. But I don't think the damage would be anything close to what happened when the Hindenburg report came in 2023. So maybe from a trader's perspective, maybe another 15-20% lower than here could be a decent buying opportunity. Because as far as investors are concerned, I have rarely suggested buying Adani stocks.
Okay, all right. Got that. In fact, I mean, since we're on the news, on the story, let's actually understand all the ramifications. Hormaz, tell us about the entities that have been named in this U.S. court order as well. Okay, I think we'll go to Hormaz in a bit. Let's see if we can go across to Ashmit, because what Ashmit has been doing, he's been looking at past precedent as well. And cases where there have been settlements, a lot of global MNCs who've faced such charges under the same act in the US, how they've gone about it, and whether settlements actually happen. So we'll go to Ashmit on that in just a bit, but I think Hormaz is with us. So Hormaz, more details on what's come out in this court order.
State-run power companies have been named in this U.S. District Court order, and some of them include the Chhattisgarh State Power Distribution Company, the Tamil Nadu Generation and Distribution Corporation, Gridco, Jammu and Kashmir Power Corporation, and 3 entities from Andhra Pradesh, which include the Andhra Pradesh Central Power Distribution Corporation, Eastern Power, and Southern Power Distribution Company as well. So 3 entities named there from Andhra Pradesh. Now, what has happened here is that between October of 21 and February of 22, both the US-linked entity and the Adani Group had signed PPAs with the SECI, where the US issuer had agreed to supply the SECI with 650 megawatt of power for the states of Chhattisgarh, Tamil Nadu, Odisha, and Jammu and Kashmir, while 2.3 gigawatt was to be supplied to the state of Andhra Pradesh. And the Indian entity was also signing its own separate PPAs with the SECI for supply of power to the 5 states that I just mentioned. Now, towards the end of the order, the 5 counts on which the US District Court has charged them. The first one includes the conspiracy to violate the FCPA. The second one is the securities fraud conspiracy. The third one is the wire fraud conspiracy. The fourth one is the securities fraud which pertains to the 2021 bond sale. And the last one being the conspiracy to obstruct justice. So these were the 5 counts on which the US District Court issued its order, and that showed up in the reaction in the Adani Group stocks as well.
Okay, all right. Thanks a lot for that, Hormaz. Well, the U.S. indictment on the Adani Group has claimed that the company misled financial institutions and investors in India by concealing information about the investigation. Ashmit Kumar is here to fill us in on more on that. Ashmit?
Well, just giving some historical context to how this case could move forward. Settlement is a key word that we've seen being exchanged between legal heads. There are a couple of aspects to point out here. I'll cite 4 examples. One is December 2008, when Siemens had pleaded guilty to charges of bribery, again charged with similar cases of bribery. They paid a penalty of $800 million. That's both to the Department of Justice as well as to the SEC. Second example, October 2020, Goldman Sachs. This has been the biggest settlement ever in the United States. $2.5 billion being paid out by Goldman Sachs. A key aspect here, it also led to conviction of some of their leadership figures. Number 3, September of 2022, Oracle facing charges, also specifically with respect to bribery here in India. They paid a settlement sum of $23 million to the SEC. Another key aspect here, this is a settlement that was reached with the SEC, not with the Department of Justice. And finally, number 4, the SAP very recently in January of 2024 had agreed to a settlement and paid an amount of $220 million, cooperated with the Department of Justice. What's important is that they had arrived at an agreement called the Deferred Prosecution Agreement. The catch here is that it can only be reached before an indictment. So here are a few takeaways. Number 1, there is a precedent for settlement, so that is certainly something, an angle that Adani lawyers will be looking to explore. Second, settlement is not always possible without the admission of guilt. There are some cases where the guilt has to be admitted. That is something that will also weigh on the minds as far as Adani is concerned. Number three, settlement with the SEC does not automatically mean settlement with the Department of Justice. These are two parallel proceedings. They'll have to seek out settlements with respect to both these proceedings that they are currently facing. Number four, settlement with the Department of Justice becomes difficult after the court has passed an order of indictment. So that is something that is a handicap the Adani Group will be moving forward with. Another big takeaway here is that the settlements don't come cheap. We've seen some of these figures, very large amounts having to be paid as far as the Department of Justice or the SEC is concerned. And finally, settlement is no guarantee that there won't be any criminal prosecution of the leadership figures that have been mentioned. So these are 6 takeaways that the Adani Group will be working with as they look to explore a settlement, look to explore a solution to this issue coming out of the US.
Okay, Ashwin, that's beautifully summed up. Really tells us where things stand right now and which way they could perhaps go. Thank you very much for that summary. Let's quickly move on to some other news in the market as well. Indian Hotels, that stock was in focus. It actually managed to move higher in a market that was otherwise overall lower. Mangalam is here to tell us what got the street excited today. Mangalam.
That's right. Indian Hotels was indeed one of the top gainers today and actually hit a fresh record high as the investors checked into this stock yet again. The company, remember, on its analyst day a couple of days ago, did indicate that it is looking to double its hotel portfolio, double its revenue by the end of this decade as well by 2030. And all of this while, seeing a higher share of revenue coming in from management fees, almost 1,000 odd crores, and nearly 30% CAGR growth for some of their new businesses, which will then form about a fourth of their overall pie itself. Brokerages like that because, Jefferies has gone ahead and increased its target price to 900 rupees on the stock, having its positive call, saying that the company's past deliverance on promises gives them confidence about the future as well. And the current pipeline indicates 1 new hotel opening per week up until FY30. That's a big positive. Demand-supply dynamics are favorable for the hospitality sector and in which Indian Hotels is likely to benefit. A 20% ROCE target is something that Morgan Stanley likes as well. They have a positive rating, overweight rating on the stock with a target price of close to around 759. And this is something that the management told us as well, that the Indian hospitality sector is still on the cusp of an up move.
All right, Mangalam, thanks a lot for that. Well, the other buzzer was UPL. They've gone ahead and they've unlocked some value by selling a stake or divesting a stake in one of their subsidiaries. Sonal joins us to help us out with a quick analysis on that. Sonal?
Well, UPL will be in focus because their subsidiary has received some money. It is via stake sale, 12.5% in Advanta seed business, where Alpha Wave Global will be investing $350 million to acquire that 12.5% stake. Remember, Advanta is the subsidiary of UPL, which has already received some money from other investors as well. The transaction is a combination of primary sale, where they will be receiving an investment of $100 million, and secondary share sale by UPL to the tune of $250 million in Advanta by UPL. The primary proceeds will be used in the business of Advanta Seeds and for their inorganic and organic growth, and the secondary money will be used for deleveraging their balance sheet, something that UPL had been talking about for a long period of time. Now remember, this deal values Advanta at $2.8 billion, and when KKR had invested around $300 million, that valued Advanta EV at $2.25 billion. So there's a valuation upside that we are seeing with this deal. So going with green here. Also, the company has announced that they will be doing a rights issue to the tune of 3,377 crore rupees. This is at 360 rupees per share. It's lowered from that 4,200 crore rupees that they wanted to raise earlier. But yes, these two events positive for UPL. See some green tick on the stock today.
Okay, all right, got that. Thanks very much for that, Sonal. Well, with that, let's quickly go back to our experts. Ambarish, any interest in UPL?
UPL at these levels, I find it interesting to buy because, if you look back, debt burden, I think, was a major negative for this stock, which has been keeping the pressure on the stock for a while. So debt coming down, although it's comparatively small, but it's positive for the sentiment. Then you look at the rights issue. Again, rights issue is quite small, 1:8. So the discount doesn't really make a huge difference for the shareholders as such, but still slightly positive. I think the biggest positive here is the valuation for Advanta, which has gone up. So overall, at these levels, I don't see much of a downside. And once you have the market picking up, I think UPL should outperform.
Okay, all right. Thanks a lot, Ambarish, as well as Shilpa, for joining in and giving us your view on a whole host of stocks that we just discussed. For the time being, we slip into a short break. We'll get you all the top corporate voices along with the key market events to watch out for on the other side. Welcome back. Here, tuned into Markets Forward. As promised, let's tell you all the top corporate voices that joined us earlier today. Suzlon, the stock was up close to around 5% in trade. The management told us earlier that the order book currently stands at over 5 gigawatt, which is the highest ever. The CEO, Mr. Chalsani, also said that the company will consistently grow at a rate that is higher than ever before. He believes that 100 gigawatt of wind power is required to meet India's predicted demand by 2030. Moving forward, CEAT as well was down in trade by close to around 2%. The company is expecting a slight increase in raw materials in the current quarter. However, in quarter 4, they expect things to cool off a little bit. The managing director, Mr. Banerjee, believes that the company's FY25 margins will be a little lower in comparison to the previous fiscal. This is spite of seeing a recovery in the second half of the fiscal year. He also added that growth will be in double digits in the second half of the year.
All right, and with that, we are almost at the end of today's show. But before we wrap up, let's bring you all the key events to watch out for tomorrow. It's back to Vinny for that. Vinny.
Yes, so important events on the domestic front and in India. We're watching out for the HSBC PMI data, composite manufacturing as well as service PMI data that will be coming out tomorrow. And also on the domestic front, we have the RBI's foreign exchange reserve data, so key one to watch out for there. Moving on the global front, USA also will be coming out with its S&P PMI data. That's also going to be for composite, manufacturing as well as service PMI. Let's talk about some more action and stock-specific action on D Street that we're watching out for. Dividend payments from Premco as well as Vidal. So keep an eye out on that. And lastly, we also have stock split that will be taking place for Sudarshan Pharma. So yes, that's an important one to watch out for there.
Okay, all right, Vinny, thank you very much for that. And with that, it's a wrap on this edition of Markets Forward. We'll be back with more news and updates in just a moment.